Well, a warm welcome to our viewers online and for those watching us over Rogers Community TV here in Simcoe. The name of this program is Straight Talk, a public affairs show sponsored by the Midland Cultural Center in Midland. And we're coming to you via Zoom technology with the production support of Rogers TV. My name is Doug Maund, and I'm the moderator of Straight Talk. Our topic today is the food we eat, which is a topic near and dear to the hearts of all of us. It certainly is dear to me. Food sustains us as humans in our day-to-day life and is at the heart of our lives as families. Not only is food required nutrition for life, but it's symbolic. Most of the good memories we have relate to food. I think of family gatherings. But this past year, the pandemic has created a new and urgent focus on Canada's food security and supply. Now, since the last war, I think it's fair to say that Canada has largely become an urban country. And while many of us have had rural roots or from farming stock originally, for most of us, that's generations in the past. So most of us today have little idea where our food even comes from and the challenges faced by agriculture and the food industry. Now, we're very pleased to have with us today a panel who have spent their lives in agriculture and food production. You'll be very surprised, maybe surprised, by what they have to say. And you may learn that some of our basic assumptions about farming and the food supply are nothing more than perhaps outdated myths. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from them and to find out what their take is on these issues. Can Canadian farmers feed our growing population here in Canada? Or will we come to depend more on foreign supply? What lessons do we take from the pandemic about that? And what is the role and the future of the traditional family farm? What challenges do modern farmers face and local farmers? And how safe is the food we eat? That's one of many questions that we hope to get to tonight. And there's a lot to talk about. It's my pleasure to introduce our guest panel. Firstly, I would like to introduce John Jamison. John, if you could just signify. There you are. Thanks, John. John is a professional agrologist who has worked in agriculture for over 20 years. He's worked in government. He served as the executive director of the PEI Federation of Agriculture and is currently president and CEO of the Canadian Centre for Food Integrity, which represents a broad section of the food industry. And I know that John will be looking forward to talking about the work of the Centre. And he joins us today from Prince Edward Island, and we thank you for being with us, John, very much.
Thank you, Doug. I look forward to the conversation here tonight.
I have to ask how the weather is down there before we go further.
Pretty darn good. We had a sunny day today. Yesterday we had some ice, but we had an ice storm with some freezing rain, but it's pretty darn good here.
Okay, well, we're jealous, but we're glad to see you. Next guest I'd like to introduce is Paul Maurice. Paul lives and farms with his family in Tiny Township and comes from generations of farmers. He served 18 years as the Secretary-Treasurer of the Simcoe County Milk Committee and was also on the Land Stewardship Council. Paul is also a former deputy mayor of Tiny, and he has been active for most of his life as a volunteer firefighter. And I understand his family is carrying on that tradition. So have a warm welcome to you, Paul.
Thank you.
Very good.
Nice to be here.
Glad you're with us. And finally, I'd like to introduce John Morrison. John is the current president of the Simcoe County Federation of Agriculture. He has a lifetime experience in raising cattle and in the management of mixed crops. John also has been very extensively involved in his community in Simcoe County, and I understand he's an award-winning coach of local hockey. So welcome to you, sir.
I'm not a coach. I was just the president. Thank you very much.
All right. So So I was close, though. I know that your team did very well.
Okay. It does do very well. Thank you very much. We have a great rivalry between Penetang and Midland.
I know. I understand it was brutal, but we don't have time for that So it's a broad topic to talk about, and we have limited time, but I'd like to ask each of our guests if they wouldn't mind giving some opening remarks about their take on these issues and what they've learned from working in this field all their lives. So I wonder if I could start with you, John Jamison, and I do want to hear something about the Canadian Centre for Food Integrity, if you wouldn't mind.
Thanks, Doug. Like you said, I work for an organization called the Canadian Centre for Food Integrity. It's a fairly new organization. It was launched in 2016. It's a national organization, and we have a board of directors from all across Canada. What we do, our purpose really is to help link the food system with the consumer. And we do that through, providing communications, or we also do a fair bit of research where we survey Canadians about their attitudes in the food system when we provide that data to industries, so they have an understanding of the food system. And then we also provide, webinars and resources and that type of thing. And as you mentioned, I've worked in the food system or the food industry almost my whole life. I actually started out in fisheries, then moved over to agriculture and worked with the Federation of Agriculture, and then as a deputy minister in provincial government, and then here with the Centre for Food Integrity. I think the one takeaway I would have for the food system in Canada is that it's second to none in the world. And I'll tell a little story before we move on. And I was in China one time, and we were touring a grocery store in China. And as we were touring, I kept seeing signs in English, and it was everything from PEI mussels to lobster to beef, from across Canada. And then I saw the Canada brand. And I asked the person touring us, I said, what's with, the English signs and the Canadian logo? And he said, well, it means two things to people when they come in. They generally can't read the English signage, but they know that if it's in English and if you have a Canadian logo on it, it means two things: quality and safety. And the pride we had that day, the group that were touring that store, recognizing that around the world, our food is recognized as being safe and high quality. I'd love to be able to instill that pride in Canadians in our own food system. And I think that just kind of sums up what an exceptional system we have here with everything from great farmers to a great food system, food safety system, and all the parts in between. And we'll get into all that, a little later, but it's really, to me, that we have a system that we should be very proud of.
John, could you say who makes up the center? Who are the constituent groups?
So we have a really diverse membership, which is our strength. So we have, input suppliers, the people that supply, pesticides and fertilizers to farmers, to farm organizations. We actually have government departments that are members. And then we also have the retailers and the folks like Maple Leaf Foods and organizations like that. So our membership actually takes in the whole food system, which is pretty unique in an organizational structure in Canada.
Well, we'll look forward to hearing a lot more about that. So thank you, John. Paul Maurice, do you have any opening comments along the lines we've been discussing?
Yeah, thank you, Doug. Just to give you a brief outline of where I've been in agriculture, I was born and raised on the family farm here. My son Alex and myself, we represent the fourth and fifth generation on the farm. My grandfather and my father, we were into the mixed farming. In 1963, we went into the dairy sector. We were in the dairy sector for 50 years. And in long story short, in 2014, we basically got rid of the girls and we went into the chicks. We switched over to broilers. We had thought of expanding the dairy operation, but when we tried to get rid of the check marks, there were just check marks that we couldn't get rid of. And so we decided to switch over to broilers, and very happy of the move. And we cash crop of just under 1,000 acres. But I'd just like to pick up on John's comments of how proud I am to be a farmer, and for the quality and the product that we actually put out in Canada, second to none, and very proud to be able to be part of that.
Great. Well, obviously the family farm where you've come from, where you think it might be going. We need to talk about that, and we will.
Definitely.
And John Morrison, again, welcome to you.
Well, we're a family farm here too. I took it over from my father, and he took it over from his father, so we're third generation. We're in the cow-calf, and then we gradually got out of that, went into cash crop. I think we were one of the first ones to grow edible beans in the area, white beans. It really showed us the marketing end of it, of beans and our crops. And as we moved along, land was getting so expensive, we had to try and get as many bushels or yield off each acre as we could. So then we gradually went into the hay business, and we had a pretty good hay business whenever we quit. I started farming in 1974, and I retired in 2016. So going forward, we really got some great farmers out here. They're very innovative. They're eager to accept change. And I think that's a big plus for agriculture in not only Ontario, but Canada. And we are an export nation. We export a lot of grains and beef. So I think it looks rosy, but there is some obstacles we have to overcome.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, John. Well, look, I want to start at the most obvious thing. It'll be shocking to some of our viewers, but food doesn't really come from the grocery store. It comes from other places. Where does most of the food that the average consumer will go into the grocery store and see come from? Does it come from the traditional family farm that's the product of myth? Or is there more factory farming, mass production type of vignettes that is part of that production? So let's talk about that myth. Where does the food come from, gentlemen? In any order that you want to talk.
I'll start off. Factory farms, I have trouble calling factory farms. In fact, family farms now are just like factory farms, if you like. What we take is a raw material and we turn it into something that can be sold in a grocery store. So I think that factory farms, it's kind of a myth. Like, we got to be really efficient in order to survive in this business. And that's what we do well at.
I think it's important, Doug, to realize, for the consumer to realize that even though we are sometimes classified as corporate or factory farms, 98% of the farms in Canada are family farms. They are family run. And we might have a corporate name behind us, but that has to do with risk management, has to do with financial structure and for succession purposes. But we are family farms. So the myth out there that there's large corporate farms in Canada is extremely, extremely low.
Is that unique to Canada? Sometimes you talk about this and they refer to mass farming, say in the Midwest, the United States of America. I don't know about their experience, but is that distinct to Canada, that there's still these farms are mainly in Canadian family hands that are run?
I don't have the figures in front of me to be able to support that, but I know of some corporate entities in the States, but there are a lot of family farms in the States also.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd agree with what Paul is saying. Primarily around the world, in Europe and US, the vast majority of farms, maybe not to the level that we see here in Canada, but are certainly family operated, family managed farms. And again, when we look at Canada, that we have an extremely high number, 98% of Canadian farms are family owned. So, and I'd just like to pick up on what John and Paul both said, that, the term factory farm is, to me, it's a very derogatory term and one that I don't really like. And, we should embrace the fact that farmers are using technology. And I think when you use the term family farm or factory farm, it almost people want to harken back to a simpler time. But But the technologies that our farmers are using today, our family farmers are using, allow for better production from a smaller piece of land. They allow for better animal welfare. They allow for better food safety. So using those technologies in modern production is what allows us to be able to feed Canadians and people around the world. And we are an export country as well as we feed ourselves. But having that technology and the ability to use it really makes a difference in us being able to supply a quality product to Canadians.
I was talking to one of you about a friend of mine when I first came to Dufferin, Canada in the early 70s, Dan Needles. And he wrote the Winfield Farm story about a stockbroker who came to Dufferin, and he wanted to do it all by the old ways. He had a horse and he had a plow. And of course, all the modern farmers came in and had to rescue him all the time. It was quite hilarious. And it sold out the Federation every single year when Dan brought the show through. So that leads to modern farming methods. What's the reality of a modern farm operation today, and how's that evolved over your lifetimes?
In my career, in my lifetime of farming, I've seen some major changes. And as John Morrison had mentioned at the beginning, we're a very innovative group, and we are prepared to accept changes for the better. And when I look at some of the technology that we're using back in the 70s and compared to what we're using now, I think we've done a complete revolution. And a lot of what we are doing is for the betterment of the food production, the quality that we are producing. It is best for the environment. It's best for the care of our animals, our land. I am very proud to represent a group of farmers that are the stewards of the land, air, and water. You have to realize that we work on our farms and we raise our families on our farms. So at the end of the day, what we put out, we are consumers and we eat the same food. So I take very high pride in being able to do that. And but the technology and the tools, and that's something very important that we should maybe stress a little bit, is that we need those tools to be able to face the challenges that we have that we're looking at. We have to increase our production by 60% by 2050 in order to meet the demands of the world. And if we don't have those tools available to us, it makes our job extremely hard.
Anybody else have a comment in that area?
I can remember one of the first things, I was at a meeting one time in Guelph, and we had a presenter from Illinois, and he was saying, what was the biggest change in farming? And everybody was kind of scratching their heads, and he was saying, putting cabs on tractors. I was going back into we had that meeting around 2000 sometime. But just see the amount of technology that's presented since then till now. Like, we got tractors now that pretty much drive themselves. Like, you put in your point A and B and it goes a straight line. And we need that technology. We also need a lot of research to keep up to date on everything, on our crops, on our crop protection stuff that we use. And we got to have that technology in order to be competitive, because all the other countries are using it. So we need that technology and we need that research. I can't stress enough about the research that we need in order to keep going forward.
John Jamison, all these changes with the modern technology sound horrendously expensive. I think anybody of our viewers would wonder about the viability of modern farming with all this outlay of capital and technology and new agrology techniques and all that. Do you have a general thought about that?
Well, technology is expensive, but as the farmers on the panel here said, it also helps them be more productive, more competitive, and it's also better for the product they produce. So, it's part of the cost of doing business, but it's also part of how you produce a quality product. One of the things that I think we haven't necessarily done a very good job of is communicating the value of our technologies to the public. And it's not just about, sometimes you feel like because you have science on your side, that's enough. But we have to do a better job of telling the story of why we use, GMO technology or gene editing or some particular thing, and do a much better job of communicating that to the public. I read a study the other day, and it was from Italy. And they took a group of, regular Italians, and they asked them if it was safe to eat GMO foods. And about 55% said, yes, I feel good about it. They also asked the same question to the scientific community. And about 99% of the scientific community agreed with the statement that GMOs are safe. So you see that split between what the general public thinks and what the scientific community thinks. And what that tells me is that we need to do a better job of bridging the gap and explaining the value of the technologies to the public, because they're not just valuable to the farmer. They're valuable to the public because they, as Paul and John said, they do a better job of protecting the environment today than they did 20 or 25 years ago, or even 10 years ago, as far as that goes.
John, I'm going to ask you to just briefly say what GMO is to those who don't have any idea.
It's a genetically modified organism.
Okay, and what does that mean in simple terms, in terms of production?
In simple terms, it's selecting certain traits in a product and more or less over time selecting for those traits. Now you can do it by traditional plant breeding or animal breeding, or you can do it by through genetic modification, which really is the same process, only it speeds it up more quickly.
I seem to recall there were some movies and horror stories that gave those initials a bad rap. Is that what you were referring to earlier?
Yeah.
Okay. And the consensus, I'm sure, for all our guests is that this is one of the secrets to modern farming generally.
The other misconception is that there are a lot of GMO products in the market. There's actually only, I think, 13 or 14 in total, and some of them are, cotton and stuff like that. So there's, the number of GMO products that are actually on the marketplace is actually quite low. And when you see the label that it drives me crazy, this non-GMO, well, many times the sticker that says non-GMO on a product, there's actually no GMO product there. It's really confusing the consumer sometimes.
John or Paul, you have any comment on what John has just said?
Just picking up on what John has mentioned, when it comes to qualifying whether a non-GMO or an organic product is better than the other, there is no real difference at the end of the day. And we as consumers should consider ourselves very lucky that we have the opportunity and the choice to be able to go to the grocery store and buy whatever you want. There's a multitude of products out there, and we should count ourselves extremely lucky to have that opportunity. But I'm the same way as John. I get so upset at seeing some advertises, and there's one on bread, and they say non-GMO product. There is no GMO wheat. So it's a marketing scheme.
Well, I mean, that raises the question of what does organic really mean from your perspectives? I mean, I've been doing the shopping since the pandemic for the most part, which is a pathetic learning experience on my part. It's more failure than anything. But I go out there and I see organic. I'm thinking, well, that must be good because organic sounds good. What does it really mean to you, gentlemen? The term organic in terms of quality.
For me, it means a different technology that they are using to produce that product, and I have no qualms with that whatsoever. If there's a producer that wants to be able to work with that and produce that product, and there's a consumer out there that wants to buy it, I have no problem with that whatsoever. It's like I said a while ago, let's count ourselves lucky that we have the opportunity and the choice to be able to do that.
Okay.
I think too, being organic, you have to, after so many years without using any fertilizers or pesticides or herbicides, I forget the timeline, is it 5 years? I believe, I'm not sure. of not using any of those products in order to be qualified as organic. And then you have to use organic material in order to control your weeds, either cultivation or some other means. And the same with herbicides. And organic, if somebody wants to grow organic and buy organic, by all means, go ahead. But there's no difference in nutritional value of the food that's being produced. I'm sure of that. Thank you.
One of the things consumers get confused about with organic is that there's no inputs. No pesticides or, for fertility, that type of thing. There actually is products that are naturally based that are allowed to be used by organic producers. So, like Paul and John said, it's a mode of production. It's a way of producing the food, but at the end of the day, the nutritional value of an organic apple is the same as the nutritional value of a conventional apple.
John,
Something that's.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Doug, something that should be said also. If we were to produce all organic foods, it would take 40% more acres to be able to produce the same amount that we do under what I'll classify conventional farming. So if we're talking on saving the environment, there's a balance that we have to work with.
I see. John Jamison, I want to direct a question to you about the retail chain. That's part of one. You represent the groups, some of the retailers, the distributors, and that's changed mammothly since I was a kid, and I just wonder how that has impacted on the producers that you also represent.
Well, it's certainly changed, and when you think of a food retailer today, like a modern grocery store, what you see in most stores is a minimum of 50,000 products. And that's the big change that you've seen over the years, that certainly wasn't what it was. So what we see now when the consumer goes into a store and they have all this choice, and they can choose whether they want organic or conventional, or they want to have beef or pork or whatever. And that impacts on the producer in the fact that because of all this choice that we have in Canada, then we need to be able to make those choices. And then the other piece is, there's different sustainability initiatives that farmers have to meet. There's record keeping. There's all those pieces that come with all that choice that is available in the grocery store today, and also the fact that years ago people used to eat what they call seasonally. They'd eat what's available to them, but now we'll have grapes in the wintertime and access to products year round. So it's changed what the consumer wants, and then the farmer himself, it trickles down, and they have to produce to meet that demand.
I mentioned food security earlier, and I'm not sure many people have an idea of what that means. And is it an issue as far as Canada's overall production to feed Canadians is concerned?
I'll jump into that one. I think food security, we are fairly lucky here in Canada, but with COVID, it sure has brought some challenges. Yeah. One of the things that probably a lot of us don't realize is that we bring in 60,000 immigrant workers to fill some jobs, to be able to put the crop in and to take care of it and to harvest it. And this past spring, I know of one asparagus farmer that had 400 acres, and he was not able to get his immigrant workers to come up. He advertised to have people come and help harvest the asparagus, and he had 2 applications. And the 2 guys showed up the first day, and halfway through the day, the one guy said, my back is hurting too much. I can't do this. He left. The second guy came back the second morning and said, this is too hard, and I quit. Well, if you have 400 acres of asparagus that needs to be harvested, and you don't have the workers there to be able to harvest it, that is extremely stressful. And so insofar as being able to produce, we're there. But we need the workforce to go along with us. I think when it comes to food security, also in what we've seen with COVID, is the shutdowns of the plants because of the COVID infection that has affected processing, and that's where I see a big stumbling block. And through COVID, even though it has been a royal pain, I'm anticipating that we are going to have some very good discussions on bringing back the necessities to Canada and Ontario insofar as processing and being able to manufacture more of our stuff and be more self-dependent. So the good stuff to come.
Yeah, if I could jump in here too, like it really shows the processing capacity that we have here in Ontario to process our foods. Like if there's one meat packing plant, if it tests COVID, it shuts down and it backs up the whole cattle chain right back to the cow-calf operator. What does he do with his cattle? He still has to feed them. But the food's still there. We just don't have the capacity to put it through the processors. And one big thing was too, more people were baking at home. Well, we had lots of eggs, but we didn't have cartons to put them in, because whenever you go to a restaurant, they go like in big cartons. They don't go in little cartons. And same with your milk. Those Tim Hortons are little packages. They don't come in quarts. And it was the packaging, I think, that kind of slowed everything down. But once they got that up and stream, everything was going good, I believe. But that was the biggest thing. I think it was the packaging and then the processing end of it.
Well, somebody said we're an exporting nation. John Jamison said that with pride. Well, where's the balance, John? John, I'm directing this to John Jamison, in terms of exports versus imports and our security, in the sense that, we've been shut down. We've been isolated from the world, and we need to look after ourselves. So what should our viewers know about that, do you think?
Well, in most cases, we can produce in Canada a lot more than we can consume. We're actually we're a big country in size, but also very tiny in population compared to the size. So I think we actually we're the fifth largest exporter in the world. But we also need to make sure there's a couple of things that I think we need to think about. Is again, how do we protect and build on processing capacity within Canada, but also how do we make sure that we protect our good farmland to make sure that it remains in production. So as we go forward, I think we have a pretty good balance of what we can produce here. And I also think, when Paul said earlier, we need to produce 60% more food by 2015 just to meet the needs of a growing population. I think because of the attributes Canada has, we actually have a bit of a moral responsibility to help feed the world. But we also have a responsibility to feed our own people. And that's where industry and government need to work together to make sure that we have the right farm policies, the right processes in place that protect our farmland, but also to make sure that our farmers are paid adequately for what they do. And because, when you start losing farmers, you start losing farmland, all of a sudden your national food security starts to waver. So I think it's probably a lot more complicated question than we can touch on here tonight, but it's a number of factors, making sure we have that processing capacity, protect the land, make sure our farmers are paid well, and we get the right balance of policies in place to ensure that.
Well, certainly an issue in Southern Ontario. I mean, for any of us growing up, I remember a time when in Niagara, as far as your eye could see, there were fruit lands. And what's happening. The GTA sprawl is everywhere. And that is a huge problem for the policymakers.
It's hard to imagine, but and this I think is back to a 2016 figure, but we are actually losing 175 acres a day in Ontario to rural or urban development. No. And that just boggles my mind when I think of it, but it's something that we need to address and fix, because once we lose that acre of farmland, we can't build it back. we've lost it.
I could just jump in here too. We're losing that land, but we're also gaining land through field drainage, tile drainage.
Yep.
It's really increased our productivity. And I get back to research because of new varieties of corn, soybeans, even cereals, how much they produce now than they did 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And we need that research to keep going forward. And farmers are a lot more efficient now than what there used to be. Like we're trying to make bigger fields and we're trying to leave windbreaks. So yeah, we're losing land, but we're gaining a lot of land also through tile drainage. Whenever I used to drive out to Shelburne, west of Shelburne, I used to think that was a desolate drive, but now there's all kinds of farms out there and they're really doing well. So
I know a lot of those guys down there. They were friends and clients of mine, and they all went to OAC or the Guelph University, and they got into potatoes in a big way. And my word, they did well. But that happened in the mid 70s, and a real success story.
Yeah. So like just our technology has brought that all on stream. So yeah, we're losing land, but then again, we're gaining land too. Gaining production, I guess I should say.
Okay. Can I ask, we hear a lot about the local, eat local, the 100-mile diet. What is that? And is that a real thing? I told you I'd pitch it low because I'm not well informed. That's why we're doing this show.
Our studies indicate that, and I don't know if you call it a 100 kilometer, 100-mile diet, but one of the things that we noticed in our research this year is people are much more interested in supporting local than they've been in the past. But local can mean different things to different people. Okay. So, for example, local may mean Ontario to some people. A local may mean Canadian to some people, or local may mean, around Shelburne or Guelph or somewhere like that. So it's different. But what we did see this year in our research was a marked increase in people wanting to support local. Now, I think over the last number of years, you've seen more people, participate in farmers markets and the like. But I think there's generally an interest in supporting local. I'm not sure the 100-mile diet is as prevalent as we might think. And John or Paul may know more about this than I do.
Yeah, I agree with John's comments. There's a demand. There's been a major increase with the farmer and the consumer for that direct relationship this year with COVID. I was on a couple of meetings with local farmers that are more into the market gardening and maybe a smaller scale, and they just can't keep up with production right now, which is excellent for them. But but I do have to agree with John. Like when I hear the 100-mile local, to me, if it's been produced in Ontario and in Canada, it might be a large area, but that's still local to me.
You all were amused by my reference to that. I think that tells me that you think it's kind of trendy. And it's one of these concepts that gets bandied around, but it isn't real. Is that fair?
I don't know if I'd call it a trend, but yeah. It's an opportunity for the farmer and the consumer to be able to take advantage of that product, and if that suits their need, so be it. And just goes back to what I had said a while ago. Count yourself lucky that we have those choices available to us.
I think one of the things that we can see in Canada is that there's room for everyone in the food system. As Paul talked about, there's room for the small market gardener that's selling direct to the public, but there's also room for the larger farm to produce on a bigger scale. The thing that we're so fortunate for here in Ontario and in Canada, and PEI where I am right now, is that there's room for everyone in our food system. And again, it allows that not only the choice of product, but actually the choice of where you want to purchase that product. So, you know, the 100-mile diet may be great for some people, and it may be there, but you know, there's certainly other things out there as well.
I have to agree with that, because a 100-mile diet, like, depends the time of year. Like in the wintertime, while we're storing carrots and potatoes longer now, but your fruit crops, like your strawberries and your raspberries, where would you get them this time of year? And I think a lot depends on population density. If you go up to New Liskeard, there'd be no problem up there, but go down around Mississauga and Newmarket, might be a bit trickier. And it depends what you want to eat. Like potatoes and meat, you probably do well, but if you want some of the fruits, you could run into trouble.
Well, my great-grandmother dealt with that by canning everything in sight, John.
Pardon me?
That's how we got through the winter. Everything was canned or put in mason jars.
Okay.
But we remember. Can I talk a bit in the time we have left about affordability? There's been, you know, a lot of talk about that. I think that John Jamison, you gave me the statistic that it's 9%, I think, of household income is the average last year, cost of food and supplies. The average person might remember back on what it cost a loaf of bread in the 1950s and say, my word, I can't believe I'm paying that. What about affordability? What's the straight thought that you gentlemen would have about what people pay for their food in this country? Not to be provocative, but it's a good question.
I'll start with just a comment. And so when we did our survey this year, we surveyed about 3,000 Canadians from across Canada. And when you get into that size of a survey, you have a confidence level of about plus or minus 2% of your results. So it's quite accurate. We gave them a list of 20 to 25 issues and asked them to rate them from 1 to 20. The number one issue that Canadians identified as a concern for themselves was food affordability. And so food affordability is top of mind. Now, as I mentioned, we actually have, on average, the second lowest food costs in the world. Compared, you know, the US is the lowest as a percentage of income. Canada is second. But, you know, but by and large, Canadians still are worried about food affordability, even though, you know, it's a percentage of income. For most of us, it is still pretty affordable. So I'll just, you know, put that out there and to start with anyway.
Paul, you want to get in here, I think.
Years ago, when I was in 4-H, we were shown a film from a U.S. senator, and the title of the film was "The Price of Food Compared to What?" And I fully realized, and I have to admit that my wife and I don't get to go shopping that often, but we all complain about the price of food, and yeah, we will strive to do our best to make it as affordable as possible. But the one thing that really irks me at times is when I look at and Doug, you mentioned the price of a loaf of bread, and I was looking at some figures the other day, and it has changed, but for the longest time there was actually less than 1 cent worth of wheat in a loaf of bread. And when the millers came back to me and said, you need to be more efficient, I have to be really honest with you, that irked the living daylights out of me. And I, at the end of the day, I will be, as a farmer, I will try and be as efficient as possible to make sure that we bring a healthy and good product to the consumer. But we also have to realize that there is a cost to eating, and I don't have a good solution for it, but that's a fact of life.
Well, affordability.
John Morrison?
Sorry, John.
Well, affordability too. Like we have to, all farm families, they do their shopping in grocery stores too. So they see the prices that they have to pay, and then they go home and see what they're getting for their crop. They kind of have to scratch their head and like, why is such a big difference? Like, what is it, 42, 43 loaves of bread and a bushel of wheat? And how many liters are there in a bushel of corn, like ethanol, like corn oil? Like there's a lot of in between guys that are getting their cut more than what the farmer is, and I think you get this carbon tax now thrown in, and some of this other government clean fuels. Like, what's that going to do to the price of food too? So it all adds up.
John, Jamison, I think you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, one of the things I think that the Canadian Federation of Agriculture identify is a day called Food Freedom Day. And it's when the average Canadian has earned enough money to pay for their groceries for the year. And that period of time keeps getting shorter and shorter. I think it's around the 1st of February now. The other thing I think when we think about food affordability, and our research sort of backs this up, is when a family goes to a grocery store, now because the grocery store offers so many different things, in that basket may be, cleaning supplies or pharmaceuticals or, sometimes even clothing or God knows what. They tend to lump that expense as a grocery expense when, maybe 60% of what's in the basket is actually groceries and another 40% is other products. If you look around the world, there's in Europe, typically they're in the teens, 14, 15% of their income is spent on food, but a lot of parts of the world, 30, 40, 50% of their income is spent on food. My girlfriend came to Canada as a refugee from the war in Bosnia a number of years ago. And I remember her telling me about when she and her parents were refugees in Serbia. And she said, you know what, we just get up every day and try to figure out how we were going to feed ourselves. And so her attitude toward the food system, because of that experience, is quite a bit different than anything I've seen before. And we're very fortunate here in Canada that we haven't seen that struggles to feed ourselves that other people have seen around the world.
It's right to be reminded just how blessed we are in this country for so many reasons, and that's one of them. That's true. I think that the issue becomes politicized. I mean, since COVID hit, a lot of people were out of their jobs. Some got the government subsidy, some did not. And the food banks, certainly locally, were really hard hit. This isn't a fair topic for producers and the food industry per se, but I think that the ability of people on fixed incomes, certain struggling people such as seniors, that was a pointed part of the discussion, So I'll leave that for perhaps other policy people to talk about, but that is something that's the concern that you hear raised, particularly since COVID. So COVID, is that going to drive costs up, gentlemen, do you think? You talk about what a pain it's been, how difficult it's been in terms of production and these dislocations. Can we expect the costs to go up in the foreseeable future, or is that something I should ask the millers and that end of the industry?
Well, I think it's going to add to the cost because of all the protective equipment we need now and the hand sanitizers.
Yeah.
So they're going to pass that cost on to the consumer. How much that's going to add to the cost, it's pretty hard to say. Even these migrant workers, they're coming out with new standards that the farmer has to provide for these migrant workers now. So is he going to absorb those costs? Like, how is he going to get repaid for those extra costs that he's going to have to add to his housing for these migrant workers? So it all adds, but how much, I don't know.
Well, any fair-minded person has to know that a business is a business. You have costs that increase. That has to change the bottom line. Charlie.
I was looking at a video today from Sylvain Charlebois from the Dalhousie University, and he was saying that he's anticipating that we could see 12%. I'm not sure that we're going to go that high. We are probably going to see a bit of a hike, as John just mentioned, because of the extra costs that have been associated but we are, as farmers, we are going to try and keep it as low as we can.
I do worry about the farm part of it because, farmers have additional costs and they have, struggles getting reliable labor. But most farmers in Canada are price takers and they're not price setters as, the retailers or the wholesalers are. So again, we have to make sure that our farmers are actually able to earn a living and be able to continue to do what they do. And they have limited ability in a lot of times to pass on the additional costs that they have through, the normal way a normal business would.
Yes. John Jamison, what about the, my phone's talking to me, excuse me. What about the carbon footprint, that issue? I mean, we're all part of this and we all have our carbon footprint just to live our lives. So this is relevant to all of us. But, in the agricultural industry gets singled out sometimes in terms of things that should be happening. And you had some comments you wanted to make about that, I think.
Well, I think that, the agricultural industry in Canada is only about 12% of our total carbon footprint because we're a northern country. People burn fuel. People need to heat their homes. That's the biggest part of our footprint. What people tend to forget is the carbon sequestration that is involved in farming and also in the livestock industry. They get a bad rap too sometimes, but they're also extremely important in providing habitat through their grasslands or again, carbon sequestration. Soil health is extremely important, and the ability to apply manure so it's just not a matter of a simple focusing on ag. The other thing is the sector for the last 20 years have really done a good job of reducing their carbon footprint, probably a lot better than someone like me that doesn't, just a consumer. And I've got a 400 horsepower truck out in the yard that I don't really need. So, we need to think about what we can do as an individual, and probably less finger pointing and more, when you're pointing a finger, you get a number of them pointing back at you. And that's what we need to think about.
Okay. Anyone else?
Just to pick up on John's points there, when you look at the introduction of new techniques that we've brought in, most farms in Ontario and in Canada have a farm environmental plan that they've gone through. I know we've gone through about 4 sessions. We've introduced the 4R nutrient management plan. We are introducing our tillage systems have changed from plowing to minimum till to no till. We've introduced cover crops, so we're activating the soil with microbial action so that it's a living organism, so that we can actually, the carbon that we are sequestering into the ground is actually being activated and being used up. So yes, we are a contributor, but I think we're also doing our fair share on being able to minimize the impact.
Okay. Gentlemen, in the time we have left, I want to talk about the future, where you see your life's work going. And you can talk about your own stories or your neighbors' stories. As I said to you earlier, my friends that were in farming in the 1980s were kind of a little bit discouraged about what was happening. But people I know now are optimistic. They see a future in the business. What are your thoughts?
Go, John.
You have to specify which John on this panel.
John Morrison.
I'm kind of optimistic about farming. You got to think where we're living too. We're living next to the GTA, and we're getting a lot of those residents coming up into our area, you well know. So I think maybe we might have to change maybe to more of a farm gate, maybe market, selling more stuff from our driveways and growing more in tents, maybe fruits and vegetables sort of deal that hit that market, but I still think there is room for the larger scale grain and oilseed farmer that's going to do all right too because of all the technology and the research that's being carried out. I can't stress enough about the research, as I said before, and we need better controls like the Pest Management Regulatory Agency. They have to have a clear mandate on their inspections and so forth. So I think, yeah, I'm optimistic about the farming. I think it's going to be all right.
Well, do you encourage your children to carry on? I mean, our children do what they want. Of course.
It's pretty hard to encourage them whenever they see the hours that you have to put in, whenever they can go and get another job and they work their 8 hours and they go home and they don't have to think about it. When you're farming, it's a 24-hour, 7 days a week job, really. It never leaves, and it takes a special person to do that.
Paul, what do you say about that?
I think there's a lot of optimism in agriculture right now. There's a lot of possibilities out there. The one thing I'd like to mention, though, is that from I get the remark from the consumer a lot of time, and from my friends, I'm classified as a millionaire, and if I'm a millionaire and that's the life that it is, I'm not sure that I want to be part of it. And yeah, when you're driving down the roads and you see these farms and great big tractors and combines and looks like we are millionaires, I think it's important to know that in Canada, the farm debt is $106 billion. We are carrying $23 billion worth of agricultural debt in Ontario. So yeah, the farming industry is a high asset opportunity, I guess. And we as farmers are willing to put up with that, but I just want to make sure that the consumer understands that it's not all rosy. There's a lot of challenges that go with it, and for some odd reason we seem to enjoy that, but it's not all that easy at times.
Well, on that note, I'm going to have to wrap this up, gentlemen. I told you the conversation would go quickly, and it has. But it's always a pleasure, and I really enjoyed this discussion. I'm entitled to 1 pun per program, so I'll say there's lots of food for thought in this discussion. And that's it. It's done. Anyway, thank you. My sincere thanks to all of you. It's such a pleasure hearing your thoughts and meeting you. John Jamison, Paul Maurice, and John Morrison, my neighbors. And thank you for joining us. My thanks as well to Rogers and our producer, Ron Clark, as well as the Midland Cultural Center and our research committee led by the inimitable Gordon McKay. On Straight Talk, our next topic for our viewers will be in April, and the topic then will be cybercrime, a keystroke away. So we'll hope that you will join us then. In the meantime, thank you for watching this show, and please stay safe. Thanks very much.